Welcome to the Decentralized Opportunity Podcast, a weekly podcast discussing innovative ideas in business and technology from unconventional and often overlooked sources. I'm your host, Tanner Lytle, here with your other host,
Wyatt Carson. Hello.
Hey.
So I know we know what we're going to talk about today, but I figured we should just jump in. And I believe you're going to start us off with a little circle time reading, right?
Yeah, so I picked up a new book recently called The Choice Factory by Richard Shotton. It is 25 behavioral biases that influence why we buy. And one of the biases, bias number 4, really stood out to me. There's a lot just kind of going on in my personal life right now, my professional life, and it really resonated. And I thought, heck, this would make a great discussion for the podcast. So the bias is bias number 4, and it is distinctiveness. So they say, when the world zigs, then zag. And I'll just read a quick little intro part and we can kind of dive into our thoughts with it. So, quoting from the book, you slowly shuffle towards the station ticket gate, a part of passengers dressed in grays, blues, and blacks. As you finally reach the turnstile, your eyes are drawn towards one of the staff on duty. The man, probably in his 50s, looks like an old punk, head shaved to the scalp and apart from a 2-foot tall, bright blue mohawk. You wonder idly what would happen if you turned up to work with a mohawk. So this got me thinking too, like how to stand apart. I mean, clearly you're going through your day to day, you're pass through probably, let's say in this example, you're on the train station or the subway or wherever, and you see same people with the same clothes, same hairstyle. Of course, you're going to notice a blue mohawk. That's the thing that sets you apart from the crowd. But immediately what this passage got me thinking about too is it kind of resonates with you. You draw it back to you and then you're like, what would I look like with a blue mohawk? Or what would my coworkers say? Or what would my family say if I showed up with a blue mohawk? It resonates with you. It actually connects with you. And I was like, man, how can we do something similar? How can we stand apart? How can we be distinctive in our own lives? Maybe not with the blue mohawk, but with other areas. So Wyatt, what's your thoughts?
Yeah. So obviously, I won't be growing a 2-foot mohawk anytime soon, but you're not wrong. It forces you to think of yourself from that perspective. Like, let's take, for example, you and I right now, Tanner. Right now, the biggest difference between yours and my attire is I'm wearing a sweater. Neither of us are standing out.
No,
right now.
I was thinking about that, like a gray shirt with a gray background. If you're just listening to this, I wear the same thing every day. Yeah, we're not really standing out, are we?
But once again, I think your quote is not about necessarily always your physical appearance, but standing out in general. If I showed up to work with the 2-foot mohawk, my boss might have something to say about that. If I could get away with it or not, I don't know. But the point of it does make you think is, well, how do you stand out? Do you want to stand out? Is there value in standing out? Or has my junior high wallflower, sitting during a dance type of behavior continued on through adult, and is it serving me well? It really, I think that whopping like 3 sentences you read raise a million questions. So I could see why this attracted you as a discussion. Absolutely.
With the podcast, for example, it's not about how we look, but we're actually focusing more on being distinctive on what we're thinking and what we're communicating. Right. So in many ways, by dressing a little bit unappealing, it's less distractive in that sense, so people can focus on the content a little bit more. So maybe we're onto something there. But yeah, where to stand out? You can apply a lot of these different concepts and really think deep into business. So, how to, if you're forming a startup or having a new product or you're in an existing company, how can you stand out amongst your peers? Clearly, so that works with sales and marketing and all those things, how to get better return on your ads or more people to call you back, how to build relationships and stuff. How do you stand out as somebody that you would want to be a friend with? Or if you're looking for a new you happen to be single and looking for a new relationship, how do you stand out to be someone that another person would actually want to, go on a date with and maybe get to know better, those things. And it just got me thinking, how do you be, quote, not just, quote, just another dot, dot, dot.
Hmm.
And this is something that I've been doing recently where I've been reaching out for my job to lots of different people. And part of it is, of course, there's the sales aspect, but there's the community and the networking aspect and all these things. And part of this outreach, so many people I would see this trend where if they were of like a peer level to me or maybe a little below, they would see my LinkedIn connection request in my message and they would look at my profile and they would accept. But if they were a manager or a leader of this company, they would look at my profile and think, just another salesman, and then not accept. And I was like, man, how could I stand apart? How could I be distinctive, not only in my profile, but my messaging and how I act and how I portray, to where I could be someone of value to this person that they would want to connect? Because, of course, the goal is to, sell your services or do these other things. But so much of it, more of sales and why we do business and stuff, is actually the relationships, not just the transactions. So how do you stand apart on those things? Or if you're a restaurant, how are you not just another restaurant? If you're a food truck, not just another food truck, things like that. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. So I am a huge fan of niching down. Whether you're starting a new business or you have an established business and you're maybe at a inflection point where you need to pivot and maybe make a change in your existing business. I firmly believe in finding a subcategory of a category and making that your focus, making that when people think about that, they think of Wyatt. For example, I'm obsessed with lean. That's what I do for my job, but I do lots of different types of lean. I'm obsessed with scaling down to like a really weird niche. Right now, I'm obsessed with blue collar transitions into lean. And this is weird, and I'll attempt to explain it without going way into the weeds. I'm obsessed with people learning about lean and getting certifications and doing the training, but I have become hyper focused on what we would call blue collar folks getting into lean. So, lean, whether you're in an office building wearing a suit and tie or a manufacturing plant wearing steel toe shoes, lean exists in almost every industry in the world. And it all is essentially the same thing. I'll get slapped by a million lean experts saying that, but it is, whatever. They can fight me. I'm obsessed with the concept of utilizing lean to improve yourself and get a raise or get a promotion or further yourself in your career. And right now, that's my hyper focus. Now, back to the business and aspects. If you wanted to start a marketing company, my job, my new company I'm setting up, Wyatt Incorporated, does Facebook ads. I don't know how to do Facebook ads very well, but say that's my imaginary company. If I'm a Facebook ad company, I've never done this before, I have no background, no client, who do you think is going to hire Wyatt to do their Facebook ads? Literally no one. Now, what if I told you that I am a Facebook ads expert focusing in on the entrepreneurship podcast space, where I have a background of providing amazing ads that bring thousands of viewers and new subscribers to your entrepreneurship podcast? Tanner, you might be a little bit more interested in who Wyatt is than the previous one, right? Because it's relevant to you. Now, that means everyone in the world who doesn't have an entrepreneurship podcast would not care about Wyatt. But those that do, I'm now on their radar, versus before I'm just another person in the crowd, another piece of the white noise who started a very generic business and hoped people would find me. That's the power of niching down. You're going to lose a ton of potential customers, but the ones that you do attract are going to be real customers.
So I did the sales training in Iowa a few years back. And one thing that you mentioned here with like how all the people in lean are, the concepts are kind of the same and they can fight you. This concept came to my mind from the sales training, and it was called permission to play. And there is, with the concept that there is kind of just a baseline standards of things you will do or you have to do or requirements you have to meet just to be in the game. So for an analogy, let's say that you're a basketball player. So of course you're going to need to know how to dribble the ball, pass the ball, shoot, play offense, play defense, know certain types of things. None of those things will make you stand out as a basketball player. So many times, if we put this in a personal context or a business context, we'll focus on the permission to play things as our ways to stand out. But then you're just competing, like you were saying, with everybody, and you're not really standing out. So in the basketball analogy, well, what would make you stand out? Well, maybe I'm tall. Okay, well, that's great. And so you can use that as leverage. But let's say you're competing in an area such as the NBA. Well, then everybody's tall. So what is the difference? Or maybe you're really tall. That is your thing. You're 7'3", and you're the 0.1% of the height of the basketball. Well, that's your thing to stand out. Or maybe you're really fast. Or maybe you're really good three-point shooter like Steph Curry. All of those things are actually the things that you should focus on to show how distinctive, where you stand out, and not the things like, man, I know how to dribble the ball, or man, I know how to play a 3-point triangle offense or something like that. So I think those are really key things that people mistake. They think, okay, yeah, I do all the things. Clearly now I should stand out, but those are just permission to play. You mentioned lean. Can you talk about? I know you have a unique story with lean, so let's shift to where maybe we've stood out in the past, and how can find those things that aren't just permission to play.
Yeah, that's a great point. So my story, I feel like every story I have is about lean. I'm sorry, I'm not that exciting, guys. I fell into lean in a funny kind of capacity. It started in the military. They needed a volunteer to learn some stuff, and it gave me an opportunity to go drink beer. So I volunteered, not knowing what it was. Turned out to be some lean training, blah, 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 blah. I came back from my deployment overseas, thought I'd never use that skill set again. But I arrived back into the States from my deployment like a lot of veterans did, without a job. I was unemployed. So I'm applying for a million jobs, doing things, and I finally get this opportunity to work in a very professional environment. I had never had really a professional job before, but someone gave me a chance, and I started working at that job, not in a lean capacity, in a different job. And one day, like 6 months or so after I started working, they asked, "Hey, Wyatt, would you be willing to help out these consultants in this new project? I heard, I remember you say you had a little experience in the, process improvement back in the day. Would you want to follow around some consultants and learn what they're doing and help them out?" Sure. Why not? I had no idea what they wanted. Well, that set me off on this trajectory to learn lean, and started getting my certifications and trainings. And essentially over the next 5 or 6 years, I continued to learn about lean and process improvement, and worked my way up to a master black belt in lean training certifications. There's yellow belts, green belts, black belts. And then at the top is a master black belt. Essentially means all the tools and techniques, and you can train others, is the purpose behind a master black belt. So I worked my butt off and did all the studying and went to all the courses and all the training to get my master black belt. Now, I got my master black belt when I was 31 years old, maybe. So according to the certification of this piece of paper I have hanging on my wall, I'm an expert, but I'm 30 years old. How many 30-year-olds do you take at face value in terms of being an expert in really anything? Probably more so than a 21-year-old, but still. And I looked young. I just didn't get a lot of respect, even though I had this great certification, and obviously I'd worked hard and punched my mic. But I had the certification. I became a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt at the age of like 30. And for a while, it was nice and cool and gave me a big resume boost. But after a while, it skyrocketed my career. And the older I got, the more experience I got. Not only didn't I have the certification behind my name, but now I had the experience to back it up. Which is why I can say things like, lean experts can fight me, is because, well, we can have a spirited debate on these topics now, versus 30-year-old Wyatt could not. I wasn't prepared for that. But that certification, that willingness to volunteer to help out some random consultants at my previous company, propelled me and my career much further than I ever expected to go. And I'm very thankful and happy for it, which is why I still preach about lean today, as it did wonders for me. Just a weird happenstance of going down that path. But it set me apart from everyone else that I was working with, my current work group back in the day. we all did the same task, but now I stood out separate because I had volunteered. I had learned a different skill set. I went and got certified. And they stayed in that department while I moved on to bigger and better things. And I'm working with senior vice presidents and doing these awesome, cool things, all because I did something to set myself apart. And that's the value we're trying to talk about here is not being another person in the crowd. If there's a team of 10 people and all 10 people are doing the exact same thing, figure out a way to do it better, or figure out a way to do something else that supports that role and makes it better. That's where the value's at. And that's how you can set yourself apart and skyrocket your own career or your own goals and hobbies, doing something unique so that you're not just blending in with the crowd.
Well, just to continue on with what you're saying, I wonder how many lean master black belts there are compared to how many people with 2 foot tall giant mohawks.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's probably, I mean, they're both pretty small crowds, to be honest with you. And that puts you in that like 0.01% of the population to stand out. Again, yours probably has a lot more versatility and application than just having a tall mohawk. But in the sense of your resume or your capabilities and all
Right.
those, it's very distinctive for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, for me, I've been thinking about this quite a bit. So a big thing for me, and I know this, is just my ability to constantly learn and take in information. And so I took one of those personality assessments, like the Clifton top strengths or whatever.
Sure.
And my number 1 was input, and my number 2 was learning. Everything around me is always around absorption. And that, you know, is something that's unique to me. It puts me there, but I don't know. And I've been trying to think about this, how I can ultimately utilize that to stand apart. Because I have the problem where I'm a lot of times, I'm not necessarily essentially an inch deep and a mile wide, but I'm very, very wide on the knowledge or wide on the breadth of things, even though I may be deeper than most in terms of the knowledge on those subjects. And how do I use that to set myself apart? Because I've always been curious. So like when I was younger, I was really good at art. And so I've used that as a piece for a long time. And then I got into character animation, which was something that was distinctive, especially around here. But then I moved into business and had my own small company. And I did that for a while. And then I've done a lot of marketing and branding, done that for a while. And now I'm in sales. While I have this wide breadth, I've never really used it to stand apart unless it's my current thing. And even then, I don't feel like I've been specialized enough. I've been a little bit trapped in that whole permission to play thing. While I learned animation, I'm definitely not the best animator out there. While I've learned art and I can do art to I would say a higher level, there's way better artists, even in our local region to me, because they focus harder on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm in this place where again, why I feel like this distinctiveness resonated with me, of trying to find myself in that a little bit too. Like what can I go a little bit more all in on? What can I focus on? What can I set my identity around? Right.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I like how you preface that with, Strengths Finder or one of those other personality tests. I've taken a million of them, the DISC and, Clifton's and all those things. And, but translating those into an identity, and not necessarily an identity because you are who you are, but how do you translate all of those to strengths and how do you build upon them so that you're not fighting your own nature, right? You are a natural born learner and absorber of information, kind of a jack of all, master of none at the moment. And you're playing with the idea of, is there value in that, or does mastering and niching down? I think you and I are opposite ends of a spectrum here with the same end goal of standing out and making ourselves better because of it. Whereas I focused and niched on one thing, you have this awesome ability to absorb lots of things from lots of different areas. For our listeners, Tanner once a day is sending me a passage of a book or a podcast or a 2-hour interview he's watched on YouTube. Tanner, you are a sponge of information. and to understand how you can use that as a strength to further improve yourself it's a fascinating concept. Now you can start exploring options like, have you ever trained people, Tanner? Have you ever shared that knowledge with other people? You may not be able to go a mile deep into a specific topic, but you also are really good at connecting dots and how this piece of this puzzle goes over here and how they all interconnect into this final awesome message. People who absorb a ton of information like that, and like you do, in my opinion, sometimes make some of the best teachers, some of the best educators, some of the best trainers. Having dabbled in so many different things gives you experience that so many people have never touched. Most people in McCook, Nebraska, cannot animate a video and run a small business. You've done those already. So it is an interesting puzzle that you've placed for yourself, because every one of those strengths can be used to benefit yourself. You do have a unique one, though, that you might have to get a little creative. So where are you landing on this? And you've been thinking about this for a couple days now. Have you come to any sort of conclusions yet? Or are you going down a path of how can I take my strengths and make them better, or improve them and make it benefit me more? Have you gone down that path yet?
So it's still a sense of discovery, right? And we talked in a previous episode about values. And so I've been taking that to heart as well. It's ultimately not necessarily what's the most profitable path to take, because you might go down something and find that you don't really enjoy it. I might not really like it.
Yeah.
So I'm in this sense of, one, figuring out what I'm perhaps good at, what I'm educated at, what I can leverage off of, my from where I've been to where I am now, all that information, but using that and distilling it into something, one, that's valuable to myself and fulfilling to myself, but also valuable to other people. Mm-hmm. So I'm still pretty early in that. I like what you're saying around the educating part. And in some ways that's what we're doing here with the podcast. And I get so excited to record this podcast every week, and I'm even more excited to share it and talk about it with people. So that might be a good one. But until then, I'm probably not at the stage to really want to focus my efforts from inward to outward into showing that to other people yet too.
Fair. But let me ask you a question. Let me phrase it in a different way. Mm-hmm. Where do you feel you have stood out the most, when it benefited you the most? Because I remember very young Tanner starting a business. You're a very different person than you were. You and I, like we mentioned before, we've known each other for like 15, 14 years, something crazy like that. I remember young Tanner. I was a young idiot myself, right? When have you stood out, and how did that positively impact you? What's an experience for you?
So
maybe it's a mohawk.
A good one for us was when I was with Game On, and we focused a lot on the branding of the company, what we looked like. While we started in a small town of 7,000 to 8,000 people, we really wanted it to look like a company that could have been nationwide. And so we focused a lot on the branding and our marketing and our flyers and things like that. And we were rewarded in, oh gosh, I can't even remember the year, but there's a Game Manufacturers Association group, and they have a yearly convention in Vegas, or at least it was in Vegas back when they were having it. And we won an award for outstanding marketing, and we got to actually go up on stage and receive this award, and then the next year teach classes on what we did. So at that point, it was really taking the messaging and distilling and putting it into a very neat and appealing package that was understandable. We did commercials. We had these printed flyers, websites, all these things cohesive. So where I think I stand out a bit then, and probably still do now, is the ability to make, I don't know if the right word is, make things pretty, in a sense, make things appealing. Okay. Just maybe taking all those information points and distilling them into certain elements that are most potent for whatever we're trying to communicate. So currently, I think that might be an avenue of where we're trying to do. And again, we're doing that a bit with the podcast as well, yep. Whether it be how we brand it or just the topics we talk about. So I think that's an avenue for sure. And then the other parts, of course, are just it's on theme with making things pretty. It's the able to focus and do a painting and share that with the world, and the level that comes. So it's got to be something visual, probably.
Okay. Okay. I love hearing about other people's strengths and how they nurture them. I take every strength finder personality test that's ever been made. And I feel like for the most part, it just says I'm really boring. So I love hearing about other people's. It's always like, oh, you're analytical. Oh, well, that just means I'm boring. I know how to translate that.
So let's talk about this. Was a topic that I brought up to you, and I know you were really excited about it. We're both Dungeons and Dragons nerds. Love RPGs, so been doing that for years. And there's a concept in gaming that has now been translated for better or for worse into the real world around NPCs. So Wyatt, kind of kick us off. What is an NPC?
Yeah, so an NPC in RPGs and D&D and video games galore, NPCs stand for non-player characters. They are people who are in this imaginary world, whether it's a video game, tabletop gaming, whatever the situation is. They're people, or usually people, peppered into the story to make it more lifelike and feel fulfilled. You're playing any video game and you're walking through a town with your sword and shield, and there's a person selling, weapons on the side of the street. That person is an NPC. There is not a human being playing that character. They have a script. They say it. They offer you X, I'll give you a dagger for 10 gold. That's what they're coded to say. They're just there to make the environment colorful. So, and I will let you elaborate, but when you told me this statement, I have it written on my whiteboard next to where I work right now. Most people are NPCs. It made me think about most people are just peppered in the background to make things more lifelike and pretty. And the concept of people not being a PC, so that's the opposite of an NPC, is a PC or a player character, would be you. You are controlling things. You are the person with the sword and the shield trying to slay the dragon in the video game or Dungeons and Dragons. So the concept of being a player character versus a non-player character made an amazing visual in my head, and I'm obsessed with this statement now. So you elaborate more. What do you mean on this?
Yeah, so this comes from the great scholars of the internet on 4chan.
Oh God,
which is why too that this whole NPC people meme can be a bit controversial, right? Because when you deal with a bunch of trolls on the internet, they use it more as an insult than an inward reflective on yourself at some philosophical level. But I mean, it's in a sense, it's a realization that's true, and that's why it's become an actual meme that's used, and probably why it does hurt as an insult. So some of the points that they listed on why someone would be considered as an NPC. Yeah, let me pull up my notes here. So some traits here: blindly following popular opinions without critically examining them, a lack of originality or creative thinking in their ideas or actions, failure to consider multiple perspectives and engage in thoughtful debate. All of these things are basically just, they're not thinking for themselves. They're just doing what's told. We always have this thing before. It was about the world. To be successful in this world, you need to be a problem solver and not an order taker. Mm-hmm. How much of your thoughts are at least maybe not original, but thought through and distilled into your own voice, compared to just being placed there by whatever you've listened to and you're just regurgitating without processing. All of these things, if you're just doing the motions, not thinking for yourself, not doing all these, you're really just a non-playing character in your own life. And you're not the hero in your own story. You're just taking actions from a metaphorical game master that's, the world at this point. So I love the analogy, at least, of being the playing character, where you are in control and you are designing. And that's the fun part of RPGs, right? Is the building of your character. Absolutely. You might have rolled your random stats, and sure, you might be lower on strength but higher on intelligence, low dexterity. Mm-hmm. For me, if it was real life skill points, it'd be very low dexterity. But from those random elements, you craft a character and find your strengths. What class would be best with these things? And then you go on an adventure and you tell your own story. The NPCs don't do any of that. The game master just plops them in, and maybe they're expendable. Maybe they're, they never are referenced again. Or maybe they are a big point, but again, they're not crafting their own narratives. So, gosh, I
Yeah.
personally love the analogy.
And it goes further of, making sure that you're the hero in your story. Like, why would you ever put yourself second in your own story? Wyatt, am the main character of my story, right? Why wouldn't I put myself first? Why wouldn't I want to do things that make me happy, that drive my story further? Of course, you always have to be the supporting role for someone else. Both you and I are married. We support our spouses, right? They support us. Sometimes they are the star of the show, and you're there to help support. Those situations happen, but at the grand scheme, if you look at your life as a whole, as an adventure in D&D, you should be the main priority to yourself, doing what you want. And I'm sorry, I could go down so many rabbit holes with the concept of an NPC right now. It's really got my brain spinning. I love the analogy and the thoughts it can lead you to.
Well, and you touched on other people too, because of one of the critiques on NPC memes and just calling someone that is the dehumanizing aspect of it, right?
Sure.
It's just thinking them as something that's a toss away, non important deal. Well, no, you need to treat other people as playing characters. They're the heroes in their own story too, and they have a lot of value and a lot of history and a lot of stuff to bring in. And again, you could go on an adventure together. And just going back to being a big RPG nerd, some of those stories that I was playing with friends in the game store at like 2 a.m. in the night, I still remember to this day.
Yep.
I still remember there's still so much value in stuff like that because it was collaborative. It was exciting. We were fully in on it and we were authentic with each other, even though it was through the eyes of orcs and elves and fighters and shamans and things like that. So yeah, look at your own life and see what are you in the driver's seat or are you just letting someone else tell your story. And the moment that you start, I don't know, regurgitating the politics stuff that you saw on the TV or on the news or in Twitter or something like that, you're like, well, I'm clearly not, that's not me talking, that's someone else talking.
That all can also lead to another topic that kind of fits in nicely with this, and we've already started hitting on it, is about being genuine. And this is something that I've had some struggles with myself. Being, I can imagine I'm the main character in my story. That makes sense to me. But am I being genuine? Am I being genuine to myself, to an audience, to my family members? And then, gosh, I feel like this is an episode full of philosophy. The concept of being genuine leads me down more rabbit holes of what's the definition of genuine and who is genuine Wyatt. And I wanted to talk about a unique character. He's not a character, he's a human being, but a unique personality that I have fallen in love with in terms of respect for their uniqueness and their unabashed ability to be themselves. And some of the listeners here might be familiar with the TV show Queer Eye. Group of incredibly gay men travel around the country and they find slobs, usually straight men, and they give them makeovers and they give them new clothes, and and the concept is great and very heartwarming. And by the end of the episode, people are crying and so thankful. But I digress. One of the individuals, his name is Jonathan Van Ness. I have fallen in love with this guy. Sorry, I am married, Jonathan, but you know what I mean? This guy, he is so unapologetically himself. Themselves, I apologize. Doesn't matter. Long hair, could be wearing exactly what I'm wearing today with khakis, except decide that, you know what, it's a Thursday, I'm also going to wear high heels, and just owns it. And doesn't care the stares, doesn't care about the side comments, because at that moment, he is himself. They are doing what they do. And without regard for people. I was watching them walk around downtown, like Austin, Texas, with some of the most masculine cowboy-looking dudes ever, giving them the weirdest, crazy looks, and they just do not care. They are themselves, and I've fallen in love with the concept of being genuine about yourself. Not to go down more philosophy rabbit holes, but it's really watching the show and then reading Jonathan Van Ness's books and interviews has really made me consider trying to identify who is genuine Wyatt. And I think there's a lot to learn about finding who your true self is and then unashamedly, unabashedly being that person. Sorry, I went down another rabbit hole there, Tanner, but I'm obsessed with people who own themselves and are comfortable in their own skin to a degree that most people can't even understand.
Not only is it being genuine and truly knowing yourself and having that be deep within you, it's not just some surface level thing. It's same goes with like competence. If you truly know your skill, it's lean, might know art, whatever those things, you can go deep within that.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that you want to really stand out for, right? You want to put yourself out for, because one of the traps that can happen is let's say that you want to start just getting attention for attention's sake. And so you start blasting out there that you're the best, whatever, or you're super excited. Or let's say, again, with your Queer Eye analogy, you start being very flamboyant in how you go. If you're really not comfortable with yourself or really that deep in that, when people start staring at you and press you a little bit, you're going to crumble.
Yeah.
And so with whatever you're wanting to stand out for, it needs to not only be genuine, but it needs to be deep and it needs to be super a part of you. And we'll just, again, we'll take it in a business context where if you want to be distinctive because you can do this, you really need to execute on that, because it's, in some ways it's easy to get attention and in some ways it's hard, but the easy way is usually we'll get it there. People might notice you. People might even want to work with you or do different things. And then if you can't fulfill and you're really, they sniff out that you're not really who you initially said you were, then it's all for naught. And then you build a bad reputation and then it all crumbles. And then you have to try to rebuild and find a different path through it. So again, being genuine, being authentic with who you are, who your business is, what your product is, all of these things are extremely important.
Yeah. The concept of you could build an entire business off of a personality. Lots of people do it. It's very common, especially in today's creator economy with influencers and all that. Those are, for the most part, phony personalities. You can't just random watch YouTube and not stumble upon someone who's made an entire career, probably makes lots of money off of being phony. The problem with that is the pretense of that is we all understand it's entertainment. In a business sense, in a business setting, I agree with what you're saying wholeheartedly. You can put on a personality. It's called peacocking. That 2 foot, 3 foot mohawk. It's peacocking. It is intentionally trying to stand out for attention's sake. That's fine. Exactly. I agree 100% with what you said. That will work for a little while. But the amount of effort it takes to maintain that personality, to maintain that facade, could probably be incredibly exhausting, burn out real quick, versus if you were able to really get in touch with who you truly are and let that freak flag fly for a while. It's a lot easier to maintain because that is you, and it is unapologetically you. You don't have to go the route of a Kardashian and make your entire social media personality who you really are. You could, but it sounds exhausting.
So on the subject of peacocking, when I first learned about that, there's a book called The Game by Neil Strauss.
Sure.
Yeah, it's about pickup artists. So this was kind of some weird phenomenon in the early 2000s where these guys would go to nightclubs and try to figure out the best way to hit on women and do all this stuff. And ultimately, the moral of the story is while they were super successful in that, they found no real meaning from it. And so by going out and getting a lot of attention, one, you need to make sure that it's the type of attention from the people you would actually want.
Mm-hmm.
So in the case of, again, the relationships, are you, by what you're doing, are you attracting the type of person who will actually like be a good partnership, a good relationship, a good business, deal, all of these things? Because if you're just doing superficial things, you'll get superficial people. And ultimately, is that the real objective? And so there's not only the problem sometimes of getting too much attention, especially if it's negative attention by trying to stand out too much or doing things a little bit too crazy, but also the attention that you get and the people from that might not be valuable to you in the least bit. And it just takes up a lot of time.
Yeah, I mean, any crazy guy or girl can get a camera, put some videos up on YouTube, and pay $50 and get 10,000 views on their YouTube channel. Now, versus someone who grabs a camera, is their true selves, put a bunch of videos, they might not get more than 10 views on their YouTube channel forever, potentially, but they're being them true selves. And those people who blow up by being their true selves find usually deeper success because they're able to continue it. It's not a game. It's not a face you put on. In business, though, you're absolutely right. You are who you surround yourself with. And if the vibe you are putting out is fake, is a facade, people are going to pick up on that. They're not going to want to be around you in any, invested internal reason. They're going to see it for what it is. This is business Wyatt. We know he's putting on a show because he goes home and he plays Dungeons and Dragons, but during the day he's a hard ass or whatever. Just choose your face wisely, and the easiest path in the long run is always going to be choosing your true self instead of a game.
Yeah. Well, and if you're doing the wrong thing in the wrong environment, you're going to put off the people you actually want to. So let's go back to the blue mohawk Wyatt in a business environment. You're the type of people you want to work with in business and your type of clients you want to have are not people that would be attracted to a blue mohawk. Sure, you stand out, but you're not going to get anything from that. So you got to put everything in context and again, figure out what you want, what you're strong at, what you're the best at, and you can reap that rewards. And on that subject of, what you get from it, why it matters, I love the concept of the 80-20 rule. So why don't you kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah. So 80-20 rule, most people have heard about it. It's called other things. I'm familiar with it as the Pareto principle. And the concept of the Pareto, or the 80-20 rule, is that 80% of value is usually found within 20% of the occurrences. So, and it can be explained in a million different ways. Essentially, 80% of something is usually found within 20% of the population. In a manufacturing sense, if you build 100 different products, 20 of those 100 products are going to make 80% of your entire profit. That's the 80-20 rule. Usually, the vast majority of value fits within a very small subset of the overall population. That's the point behind the mathematical principle of 80-20, or the Pareto rule. It can fit into so many things. 80% of the wealth in the world is owned by 20% of the population. That's another example of the Pareto principle. But Tanner, without my freshman explanation of Pareto, how are you relating it to being genuine? How are you relating to this conversation?
So it's mostly just standing out and building those relationships. So if you're at the top and you're the top basketball player, you're the top business, you're the top whatever, if you're the most recognized as those things, the majority of the people that you would want are going to want to work with you. If you're just another salesperson, just another basketball player, just another whatever, you're actually fighting for that bottom 20% of what's left. You're just playing for scraps, right? If you're at the top, if you're in the very top 20%, if you're the ones who are standing out, getting noticed, performing, delivering, you actually get 80% of the reward. And this goes back to like biblical. And this is actually I have little notes that I do every day. And there's Matthew 25:29, quote, "For everyone who has, more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. but from the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away. Unquote. So of that, if you position yourself to be at the top, if you can deliver, if you can get noticed, if you stand out among the crowd, you're going to reap those rewards. If you're playing it smart, you're doing it right, you will get everything in abundance. If you're just another whatever, it's going to be a grind. It's going to be hard. Things are going to be taken away from you from the people who are there, because people want to work with those who are known. They're going to want the people who have all the social proof, who, are the superstars in that, because you might be able to deliver in some way. You might even be superior in some way, but they don't know that. But they know that, the person at the top can, because they've done it and the world has rewarded them for that.
That makes a lot of sense. You could have the greatest product in the world, but nothing's going to happen. You're going to make no money if no one knows about it, right? I like that use of the 80-20 rule in business. You're absolutely right. And relating it back to, you want to be that top 20% who gets 80% of the rewards given to them, versus that person who's at the bottom of the pile fighting and scrounging for that last 20% of those rewards. I love that concept. That's a good circle round.
I think we touched in pretty well on, why it's important to stand out, really dive into yourself or your business or your product or whatever you're doing, and figure out what is unique to you or those pieces, and who would want that. And again, if the person who would want that isn't the type of person you would want to work with, well, you need to change up what you're good at. So absolutely, I think that's our moral.
Well, thank you, Tanner, for this really thought-provoking. I know you've been chatting with me for like 4 days, excited about this concept, and then you got me excited for it. So I think it was a good conversation. I appreciate this subject.
Yeah, you betcha. Well, I say this every week, but man, it's the highlight of my week to record these podcasts with you and share them with everybody. So hopefully people who are listening, if they're still here at this time, we're improving retention rates, get value from it too. And we ask, please, if you haven't already, rate us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of those. It actually really, really helps
so much.
We've been getting really good response on YouTube too for new subscribers, and surprisingly, our view counts are going up really well. So it's been fantastic. So please, if you've enjoyed this content, share it with your friends, like, subscribe, all of those memes. But it really, really does help.
Smash that like button. No, don't do that. No, I'm sorry. I'll take.
I need to add some like effects. Be like pew 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 pew, and then yeah.
I want Mr. Beast to design our videos from now on, Tanner.
There we go. At least the thumbnails.
All right. Thank you guys, everyone, for listening this week, and we'll talk to you next week.